Hey, welcome back. All right, remember Jack and Annie just got kicked out of the ball field, and because Jack lost his hat, and so now they could see that they were kids and they weren't really the bat boys that they thought, and they could tell that Annie was a girl, so they just got kicked out. I wonder what's going to happen. All right, chapter 7 is called Shortcut to a Good Place. That's where we're going to start on page 50. As Jack and Annie started down the sidewalk, the wind picked up. But the wind didn't matter anymore, Jack thought miserably. That wasn't fair, said Annie. We worked hard. Who cares, said Jack. He felt sick. A wonderful day had turned terrible. Morgan's plan was a big failure. They hadn't learned anything about being great baseball players. We can't just leave now, said Annie. What about Morgan's rhyme? We have to give fly ball away, and we can't do that until we hear the final score. Jack looked back. The guard and the manager were still watching them. Well, we can't stay here, he said, or anywhere near here. Come on. They rounded the stadium at the corner of Sullivan Place and Bedford Avenue. At that moment, two kids were racing down Bedford. They bumped right into Jack and Annie. Ow! Oops! The kids cried, nearly falling down on the pavement. Oh, sorry, said Jack. Olive, Otis, said Annie. I can't believe it, said Jack. Crashing into you by accident, said Annie. No accident, said Olive. We came to look for you. We saw you from under the gate, said Otis. Jack changed before our eyes, said Olive. 1 minute he's tall, then he's short. 1 minute he can throw the ball, the next he can't. 1 minute Andy's a big boy, said Otis. The next, he's a little girl. Not that little, said Annie. The twins laughed so hard they nearly fell down again. Annie started laughing too. Then Jack joined in. He couldn't help it. What happened to you? Said Olive. It's hard to explain, said Annie. Really hard, said Jack, still laughing. You changed like magic, said Otis. You're right, said Jack. Just leave it at that. What are you going to do now? Said Olive. I don't know, said Annie. We can't stay around Ebbets Field, but we need to hear the final score. Oh, we know a good place to hear the game, Olive said as she looked at Otis. Don't we? We sure do, said Otis, as if he'd read the twins' mind. We promise you'll hear the final score there, said Olive. Where? Said Jack. You'll see, said Olive. Hold hands while we cross the avenue. She grabbed Jack's hand. Otis grabbed Annie's hand. Let's go, girl, he said. You can call me Annie, said Annie. Come on, Annie girl, said Otis. The twins pulled Jack and Annie away from Ebbets Field. Crossing the avenue, they all dodged a streetcar and jumped onto the sidewalk. That was risky, said Jack. That's how the Dodgers got their name, said Otis. Fans have to dodge streetcars to get to the ballpark. Really? Said Jack. I didn't know that. So where are you taking us? Said Annie. To a good place to hear the game, said Otis. We know a shortcut, said Olive. Of course you do, said Jack, grinning. The twins led Jack and Annie down a street with a fish shop and a bakery. They passed a candy store and headed into a maze of alleys. They ran under clotheslines strung high between buildings. Here's a picture. Here they are running through the streets. Remember back then, people didn't have washing machines and dryers. They probably washed their clothes like in their sinks and things, and then they dried them by hanging them on the lines. And they were in the city, so they'd have to do the lines from one building to the next. Isn't that cool? But there they are, running up and down the streets. Laundry flapped overhead in the spring breeze. They passed some girls playing hopscotch. Hi, Olive. Hi, Otis, the girls yelled. Next, they passed old men playing cards. Hey, Olive. Hey, Otis, the men called, waving. Finally, the twins led Jack and Annie through an alley and down a quiet block. They stopped in front of a small brick house. Here we are, said Otis. The granny house. The granny house, said Jack. This is where our grannies live, said Olive. 2 regular grannies and 1 great-great-granny, said Otis. Plus 2 great aunts, said Olive. Wow, you're so lucky, said Annie. You get to visit all of them at the same house? Mama says they spoil us, said Otis. They give us cookies and cakes. Best of all, they let us listen to their radio. Come on in, said Olive. She opened the door and led Jack and Annie into the granny house. Chapter 8 is called Safe. The small house smelled of fresh-baked cookies and coffee. The loud sound of a radio came from a back room. The twins led Jack and Annie down a hallway to the entrance of the kitchen. A large radio sat on the kitchen table. 4 women were sitting in chairs, listening to the ball game. They were listening so closely they didn't seem to know that Jack and Annie and the twins had joined them. Jack heard the roar of the crowd and the band playing on the radio. He heard the announcer say, "5th inning, the score, Brooklyn Dodgers 1, Boston Braves 1. Number 42 steps on the plate." "Come on, Jackie, we're here with you," one of the women yelled. "Give us a homer, son," said another. Jack heard the sound of a loud crack. "Number 42 hits the ball," the radio announcer shouted. "Kohler catches the fly, out. Throws to second base, out." "No," the women shouted. "Number 42 hit into a double play, 2 outs," the announcer said. The woman groaned. "I hope they don't fire him," one said. Everyone kept listening intently. Jack heard "out" and "safe" from the radio. He heard the bat crack against the ball. He heard "foul ball." He heard the band play "Three Blind Mice." Again, he wondered why this was such a big day for baseball. Nothing important had happened during the whole game, but the women in the kitchen seemed to hang onto the announcer's every word. "He's up again," one said. "Knock it out of the park, Jackie," said another. "Go, Jackie," said another. "Hush, hush," another said. The kitchen grew quiet. The women leaned forward. A couple of them whispered a prayer. "Bottom of the 7th. The Brooklyn Dodgers are behind. Braves 3, Dodgers 2. And number 42 raises his bat high," said the announcer. "We're with you, son," one woman said. Jack heard the bat crack against the ball. "Robinson bunts. The ball rolls up the first baseline," the announcer said. "Stanky to third." The crowd roared. "And 42 to second base," the announcer said. "Riser up to bat." "Bring our boy home," one of the women cried. Crack! Here's a picture. So here's Jack and Annie. There's Otis and Olive. And there are all the grannies and the great aunts and the great grannies all sitting around radio. Remember, back then, a lot of people didn't have TVs. They just had to listen to everything on the radio. "Riser hits the ball," the announcer said. "Stanky scores. Here comes 42. He rounds third base. He's headed for home." "Yes, yes," the women in the room shouted. "Go, Jackie, go," one said, clapping her hands. "Safe," the announcer yelled. "Safe," the women in the kitchen echoed. A couple of them burst into tears. Jack turned to Annie. He was so confused. "What's the big deal?" he whispered. "Jackie Robinson, number 42, scores," the announcer said. "Jackie Robinson?" whispered Annie. "Oh, man," said Jack, "of course." Finally, he understood. Jackie Robinson was the first black player allowed to play with white players in Major League Baseball. "It's official now," the announcer said. "Jackie Robinson has made history." The women all hugged each other and laughed. Otis and Olive jumped up and down and cheered. For the first time, the women turned toward the doorway. When they caught sight of Jack and Annie, they seemed surprised. "Well, hello," one of them said. "Who are you?" "Jack and Annie," said Annie. "Our new friends," said Otis. "They were bat boys in the game today, at least for a while." "Until the magic wore off," said Olive. The women looked puzzled. One of them gave Jack and Annie a big smile. "My goodness," she said. "You're the first white people ever to come inside our home." "Really?" said Annie. "Really," said the woman said. "Welcome." She pointed to a plate of chocolate chip cookies. "Would you like some cookies?" "Yes, thank you," said Annie. "Thank you," said Jack. He and Annie and the twins each took a cookie. "Have as many as you like," the woman said. Then she and Annie and the others turned back to the radio. The Dodgers were in the lead now. Jack, Annie, and the twins ate their delicious, chewy cookies as they listened to the final innings. The radio announcer reported each play until finally he shouted, "And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Final score, Brooklyn Dodgers 5, Boston Braves 3. Everyone in the kitchen clapped. "The Dodgers have won this one," said the announcer, "and Jackie Robinson has finished his first major league game." Wow, that's really cool. I like it when I read a story and I feel like I really just kind of was there and we witnessed history. How cool would that have been to be able to be there in real life? I bet you if you Google, with your parents' permission and with them sitting right there with you on YouTube, I bet you could Google and Google to see Jackie Robinson's first game in 1947. I bet you'd be able to find a little clip. So very cool. Very, very cool. Okay, well, the next time we read, we're going to finish up with chapter 9 and 10. Chapter 9 is called The Oldest Fan of All. We'll see y'all later. Bye.